Sarasota Penitentiary used to sit high on a hill on an island in the middle of Lake Erie. I used to be a guard there. Feels like a lifetime ago. This prison held the worst of the worst. It was a very secretive government-ran institution. Barely anyone knew about it. I can talk about it now because it hasn't been in operation for over 30 years. We normally kept high targets from war there, those who did great evil. I remember we spun the story that Hitler had killed himself, but in all reality, he was a prisoner at Sarasota. Come to think of it, majority of the Nazi superiors were held there. I remember just about everyone I guarded over. However, there was one I try to forget. Ricky Calvetta was a serial killer that went by the name of Firefly. It was said that he worked for the mob in Chicago under Al Capone. He was one of the Capone's secret hitmen. He was one of the worst of them all. He would take his victims, skin them alive, cut off their fingers and toes, cover them in a mixture of alcohol and gasoline, then light them on fire. Hence the name Firefly. Calvetta was incarcerated in 1940. They caught him after he had taken a restaurant hostage and skinned and killed and burned the entire place. I was assigned to stand by a cell almost all day. Something about him made me feel nervous. At first, he couldn't be trusted to join the general population. There was no telling what he might do. It wasn't until after a month we felt that he could be civilized. One day during lunch, another inmate had provoked Calvetta. He walked up to him and kept nagging at him. Calvetta had had enough. He reached up, grabbed the man by the ears, and ripped them clean off. While the inmate was screaming, Calvetta reached in and grabbed his tongue and pulled. Almost effortlessly, the tongue ripped out of the man's mouth. Right before we reached them, Calvetta had broken the inmate's neck. I've never seen such brute force come from a man. It was like he wasn't even human in that instance, like something took him over. Calvetta was put into solitary confinement for 6 months after that. I felt that punishment should have been more harsh. I was proven right. After he was released from solitary, he had fashioned a shiv. For no reason at all, he began to attack other inmates. Us guards were immediately on the scene. By the time we were able to incapacitate him, he had mauled 4 inmates and 2 guards to death. The warden had had enough and threw him into solitary permanently. Calvetta stayed in solitary until May of 1943. We had received a message from a renowned psychologist, Dr. Howard of St. Judas Asylum. They wanted Calvetta transferred there so they could study his behaviors and possibly cure him. I advised against it because of how dangerous he was. Dr. Howard assured us that they had the means to contain him. The warden hesitantly agreed. It was June of 1943 that Calvetta was transferred to St. Judas Asylum. We were told that they had a new form of treatment called electroshock treatment. To this day, I couldn't tell you what that was. All I know is that I was happy to be rid of Calvetta, even though I thought it was a mistake. Around June of 1944, exactly 1 year after Calvetta was transferred, I was at home with my wife. We were listening to our radio program until a breaking news bulletin came across. We listened as the announcer said that St. Judas Asylum was completely engulfed in flames. First responders were on the scene trying to put the fire out. They kept updating us throughout the night. My wife didn't want to hear anymore and went to bed. I stayed up because I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. There were so many thoughts running through my mind, but only one name stood out among them: Calvetta. There were only 10 survivors that made it out. Calvetta was not one of them. According to the survivors, Calvetta was the one who started the fire. One too many electroshock treatments, they would say. Out of all the bodies recovered, Calvetta was the only one not found. They decided to rebuild St. Judas in 1945. However, in 1969, another fire would consume the asylum, leaving no survivors and no record of how it happened. I can't help but think that Calvetta is still out there. Not in body, but in spirit. If so, I wonder who or what his next target will be. Impossible to think that, right? There's no way a spirit of a deranged serial killer is still killing. Or is there?